Thanks for joining us. You're welcome to have your cameras off, and it's nice to have your microphones muted just so that we're not kind of talking, there's not like noise over each other. It is nice to see people's faces, but no pressure. I know sometimes we're in the car or hi Kelsey. Um, Hi everybody. We're gonna let some other people kind of start to filter in soon, but we are gonna get started soon because we've got a lot of material to cover, it sounds like. I'm really excited for this presentation. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Erica. I run the Washington State Mental Health Resource Listserv for people in the mental health field. And this is our annual speaker series that we're doing. And Soumya, right? Did I get that right? Is our second speaker. She's going to be talking about yoga therapy, integrating yoga therapy. And I'm really excited for it because it feels like yoga therapy is something that we hear a lot about, but I don't always feel like we're on the same page about what we're talking about sometimes. So I'm really excited to hear the presentation today. We're hoping that there's going to be some time afterwards for questions. So if you have some questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and then we'll try to get to them at the end. So yeah. And is there, I know that a couple people have their cameras off too, but how many people here are already Listserv members, or are most of you come in from Facebook? Okay, sweet. Awesome. Wow, yay. Nice to see some of you guys. Um, oh, yay. I love the thumbs up, Mariana. That's great. Um, if any of you are interested in joining and you're not a member, I'm going to put the link um, to our website in the chat and you can check it out. It's $35 a year, so hopefully it's not that expensive. And yeah, we have resources and support groups and obviously like an email exchange where we share referrals and stuff. And it's just kind of a fun community to be a part of. So you're welcome to ask me any questions about that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna hand it over to Soumya to get us started.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So welcome. It's nice to see you. I'm Soumya, and just a little bit of background about me. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified yoga therapist. I've been doing that since 2007. And this is what I'm passionate about. And I was super excited about also of integrating some trauma sensitive mindfulness into this as well. So we're actually going to start with the meditation and I'm going to record it. So if you want this, you can have it afterwards. I'll send it to Erica. And it'll be about a 10-minute meditation. We're going to start with some mindfulness of the senses. Then we're going to go into some just really simple, gentle movement. And then we're going to go into more internal checking in with our body, our breath, our energy, our mind, and then we'll go from there. So you can be in any position you want to be in. You can be standing, you can be walking, you can be lying down, you can be sitting. We're going to talk about the positions of meditation as well when we get to that in the presentation, but just find a position that you can be comfortable and somewhat alert. Yeah, I'm just going to press record on my phone. All right, and before we go into the meditation, just take a moment and look around your space and notice what you see. And I know I've been in my space all day, so see if you can notice something you haven't noticed yet. like the way that the light is changing. And then tune into what you hear. And then bring your awareness into whatever you're coming into contact with, whether it's a chair or a couch or a floor or your clothing. And if you're finding it kind of difficult to feel, you might even give yourself some, like you can rub your legs or move your feet and what they're touching. Oh yeah, there's carpet underneath my feet, or my pants are kind of soft today. And then from here, we're gonna invite a little bit of movement. So as you're ready, the left hand can just lift up. You can lift it up really high, or you can lift it up really low, like you might not even see me move. And then you'll bring that hand back down. And then you'll go to the other side. So your left arm will reach up a little bit or a lot, and then you'll bring it down. You're just gonna go side to side like that. Now you might start pairing this up with your breath, where you inhale, hand moves, and exhale, hand comes down. Now, if that feels like too much, don't worry about it. Just finding a rhythm. And we'll do 2 more on each side. And the next time that your left hand comes down, we'll pause. And you're welcome to keep your eyes open, or you can close your eyes, whatever you prefer. And we spent a little bit of time focusing outward on what we see and hear and feel. Now you can stay with that, tuning into the external environment, it's exteroception, or we're going to invite to go inward to interoception, and starting by tuning into what you're noticing in the body today. You might notice a lot, you might notice a little, you might notice nothing. There's no right or wrong answer. And then bring awareness to the breath. And first, just notice the fact that you're breathing, or you're not breathing. You're holding your breath. And breath is also related to our energy. So tuning into the energy as we start our time together. Is there a lot? Is there a little? Does it feel high or low? And as I ask these different questions, just know that I don't know is a totally fine answer. Sometimes that's the most honest answer. And sometimes it's just really clear. And then tuning into the mind. Noticing the thoughts that are here, the emotions that are present. And if you come up with a word or words for some emotion that's present, now tune into the body and see, how do you know that that emotion is present? Is there a churning? Is there a softening? Is there warmth? Now bringing awareness to our intuition. And so I'm just going to hold a little bit of quiet space for anything that might want to arise. And that could be nothing. It could be an image. It could be a word. It could be a sensation. As you listen into your intuition. And then finally, bring to mind something in your life that you feel deeply connected to. Could be a pet, a friend, somewhere in nature, a god or goddess, the universe. And as you bring this person, this place, this being into your awareness, returning to the body, saying, how do you feel that connection? What does your body tells you? What does your body tell you that says, I love this, or this feels like home? Or whatever words you would use to describe it. And then in the next few breaths or so, and there's no rush at all here, when you feel ready, you can open your eyes and come back together. All right. So I'm just going to have a start just by putting in the chat one thing. And if you're still sort of in your process, no rush to do this, and you don't have to do this at all. But write one thing in the chat that you either observed or you noticed, or maybe something that surprised you about that meditation that we did. Very calm, peaceful, and tired. Clarity on two things that have been weighing on me. Thanks for sharing that. Stillness and anxiety. Yep. Stillness amid anxiety. Sorry, I didn't read that right. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Feel free to keep dropping them in. So I'm just going to start by defining some terms, because I think this can be really useful when we're talking about some things. So yoga, and a lot of times when I'm doing this, I'll sort of have us have a big discussion about what we think yoga is. And today I'm just going to share what the Yoga Sutras say, which is one of the main texts of yoga. So these are some of the translations of yoga. Union in yoga is a Sanskrit word. Integration, the sensation of the fluctuations of the mind, which essentially is, you know, the likes, the dislikes, the I'm good, I'm bad, this is terrible, this is off, this is awesome, this is awful, this is great. And so those kind of waves of the mind, yoga says it's the cessation of that. It's the stilling of those waves of the mind to essentially abide in our true nature. And what is our true nature? And so from the yoga perspective, it is this unbroken, whole, perfect, divine part of ourselves that is all of us. And yet, because of the sensations of our mind, we have a hard time accessing it. Or I'll say, I have a hard time accessing it. I won't make any assumptions about you. You might have a very easy time accessing it. So when I think about yoga, and I have a lot of people come to me and they say, okay, I'm going to do yoga therapy, so tell me the 10 poses for depression. And I'm like, well, first, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about what yoga is in the first place. And then let's see where yoga therapy goes, because that's not how I work. 10 poses for depression, because one, every single person who has depression has a different experience with it. So how could I possibly even know what poses are good for anybody's depression? And two, really, when we think about yoga from this perspective, it's about how do we reconnect to that divine true nature of ourselves and what gets in the way of that. And so the poses are like 1/1,000,000th of the whole practice of yoga. So I think that that's an important thing just to distinguish, because it's not going to look like yoga classes where I'll talk about that too, which has kind of been what we see a lot in the West of doing, like, that's what yoga is. It's doing a bunch of things and being really flexible or standing on your head, and that's all fun and fine. but that's not actually what yoga is. And so the poses, if we look at the Yoga Sutras, are really about training ourselves to sit for long periods of time so we can still the mind. So yoga is essentially, it's a mental practice. It's not actually a physical practice, but we use the physicality in order to come to stillness. And then, let's see, what is yoga therapy? So yoga therapy, this is the definition, the working definition from the International Association of Yoga Therapists, which is one of the bodies of yoga therapy that's done some of the certification process. So what they say yoga therapy is the process of empowering individuals to progress toward improved health and well-being through the application of the teachings and practices of yoga. So we're using the whole aspects of yoga to support improved health and well-being. So then we have, and I know I've been to therapists who've said, you should go to yoga before I did yoga. And so I know it's a common recommendation. And so then what's the difference between yoga classes and yoga therapy? So in yoga classes, again, this is something that you already know. So I'm just gonna kind of suss it out a little bit to talk more about it. But yoga classes are more generalized. They're not individuals. There tends to be more focus on the physical poses, and there's so many different styles. And so like what might be really great for one person might be very counterintuitive or counterproductive for another person. So there's like hot yoga where you're sweating and it's hard and it's strenuous. And then there's yin yoga and restorative yoga where you might do 3 poses in an hour and you might stay still for like 10 to 15 minutes in one pose. Or there's like alignment based or flow based. So there's so many different styles, and it can get confusing when somebody says, yoga might be good for you, and you're like, well, what kind and where and who? And it can be overwhelming. The words can be overwhelming. It can be a lot to navigate. And then when we have certain triggers, whether it's trauma triggers, health stuff, chronic conditions, physical experiences, living in a body that's not has a disability or is in a larger body, these things can make going into yoga classes more challenging. So that's what generally a yoga class can look like. And then we have yoga therapy, which is a little more individual. It's not a little more, it's a lot more individualized, sort of like more mental health therapy. And there's a focus on both the body and the mind, as well as all the different aspects of ourselves. So in our meditation, we focus on 5 different parts: the breath, the body, the breath and energy, the mind and emotions, the intellect and intuition. We focus on intuition in that moment, but intellect goes with that as well. And then connection, which when I talk about it later, it's called the bliss body, but bliss can kind of freak people out too. So sometimes I'll use connection or spirit. So it's a holistic approach to looking at all these aspects. And just like yoga classes, there's a lot of different varieties of yoga therapy too. There's some that are more like musculoskeletal focused, where it's almost like PT or rehab. And then there's more that are psychospiritual, which is more of the realm that my teachers teach in, which will be looking at more of like how to approach psychospiritual experiences through a yoga lens. What I have found with yoga therapy is it's a little bit different than more traditional mental health therapy. Is it's more focused on present and action. And so I do a lot less of like foo work or past stuff and going, okay, this is what's happening right now in the body and how can we work with that, and then taking action to move forward with that. And so it can be a really nice complement with mental health therapists who are doing more of that type of work, because that's not typically what I do. Each session involves some talking, some movement, and some meditation or mindfulness, and that can look a ton of different ways. And I'm going to give you just one case study so you can get a sense of it, because I do have people that I once had somebody come to me and said, oh, so you're a yoga therapist. Okay, so you like get people into poses and then they cry and you hold them. And I was like, no, That is not what I do either. So I'm going to kind of paint you a picture of what it can look like. And this is one of like a million ways it can look, which is what I love about it. And I imagine what a lot of you also love about your job is like, it never looks the same day to day, client to client, session to session. It's always, I feel like it's such a creative way of working in the world. And then also different than yoga classes is yoga therapy. Everything is specifically tailored to the person. So when I am doing movements or meditations, I'll do recordings, and it'll be specific to that person's goals and objectives when we're working together. So just to give a example is I worked with somebody who came to me after their friend was shot and killed. And if we go through these different kind of layers of experience, so physically they're experiencing a lot of pain, especially in their shoulders and jaw, and they had a lot of numbness in the body and feeling disconnected from the body. And their energy, they felt low energy a lot, and they had a hard time getting out of bed, and yet they weren't sleeping, so they had low energy and they weren't able to get some sleep. Emotionally, they were feeling a lot of sadness and fear and guilt, anger and rage. And when we got to also within that kind of spot, they had these beliefs that they had to be strong and they had to take care of their family and their friends' family. And if they allowed themselves to actually grieve, like they didn't think that they would be able to stop. So they tried to kind of control the grief of the process. And then when we talked a little bit about like in the meditation, that connection, one thing that they felt really connected to was their dog. And so after work, would just be them and the dog, and they would just go for a walk, and that was like their one time where they felt okay. And in our sessions, so I work in the context of 4 different pillars, and these all can be whole workshops in themselves. So I'm just going to kind of run through them so you get a sense. So the first pillar is honoring the nervous system. And so we took time to understand the way their nervous system was wired and how their fight response was helping them to continue to show up for their friends and family. This wasn't wrong or bad. It was a protective mechanism. And so a lot of people rely on this person, and their nervous system was trying to protect them to continue to be that person and to not let anyone down. Yet it also had consequences, of course. The second pillar was around cultivating discipline, and we worked with their physiology with specific lifestyle recommendations, which is the sister science of yoga. It's called Ayurveda. Again, lots and lots to go into, but we won't go into it too much. But essentially, the working of aligning with the circadian rhythm is now being supported by the chronobiology research, which separates the melatonin and the cortisol pathways, which can also help process trauma. So I think of that as like an inside out approach of working with the physiology to move trauma through the system. And then we work directly with the body and the breath by giving them physical practices that they could do to honor their grief, and also honor this kind of this strength part that was like, I need to take care of everybody. So the poses in yoga, like I said earlier, like I don't give the 10 poses for depression, but I would ask them, so you have these different aspects of grief that are coming up, fear and rage and confusion. So if those emotions had a shape in your body or a movement, what would they look like? So the poses were them created rather than me saying, okay, now we're going to do this pose for grief, because I don't know. So they would get into a particular shape as a way to embody and allow that emotion to be here. And then at the same time, we would also do some movements that could be settling to the nervous system, because sometimes those emotions became overwhelming, and they needed something that would also be comforting and soothing. So we work from 2 angles of how do we honor these emotions and allow them, and when they get to be overwhelming, what can we do to help so your nervous system can tolerate those big kind of intense moments. And then I also asked them, so when the strong part is here and it says like, I need to take care of everybody as we all go through this incredible loss. So what kind of shape does that have? What if that had a pose to it? What would it look like? And they got really big. And so then we took some time for gratitude for this part, and then asking, so this is where the intellect and the intuition come together. Like what does that strength need in that moment? And they would generally say like it needed to not be so strong. It needed to kind of fall apart, but it was afraid to fall apart. So, you know, in our sessions, they had this one moment where they could let that strength come down and be in the fullness as much as that was possible, to allow the strength to not be there for a moment. And then it was a strength and a support to lots of folks, including them, outside of that. So, and then they also had a practice of when they felt that intense pain to bring their hand to it and take 5 breaths. So I think of these as, I call them micro practices. And so, you know, if I said, okay, well, when that happens, like go sit and meditate for 30 minutes, like that would have felt, one, like intolerable because the pain was so intense. And two, it was like, is just too much. And so, but it was tolerable to take their hand to their heart or to their jaw and take 5 breaths and just be with that. And then it was like they could kind of titrate into feeling it and then go back to the strength. And so they could modulate being able to work with the bodies the way that the grief was showing up. And then finally, we worked with the meditation and mindfulness, and that was the 4th pillar. So I start with, you know, the nervous system, routine, body and breath, and then finally I get to the mind. So it's almost like I'm working with the body first, and then that sort of preps the mind to be able to feel more able to go towards the where the mind is going. So the fluctuations of the mind. So we started by establishing what I call an embodied refuge. And that is, so we touched on it very briefly in our meditation, and hopefully we'll have time at the end to do a more extensive one of that. So again, they felt really connected to their dog. So we went through a guided meditation and I would interview them. So I didn't come up with the words, they came up with the words. So when you're with your dog, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you taste? And then we start with the external feeling. So exteroception is outside of ourselves. So, and for some of us, if inside feels really a lot, like intense and a lot, going outside it can be safer. And then when we're starting to establish this embodied refuge, once we've done the external in a way that has created some sense of either, and again, these words are really powerful. So these might not be your words, but some of the words that some people have used to describe it is comfort or safety or love. So when we start to establish that externally, either through visualization or imagination, then when we go in, it's like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I can access that internally. And so that was one of their guided meditations. And then also the micro practice of bringing their hand to wherever the feeling was in their body. And so that's one way that it can look like. And then I should also say, so some of the contraindications were that sometimes if it just felt like they were replaying the phone call of when they heard, right? And so again, if I was like, well, just go meditate then, right? It's like I would actually just be, their meditation would be them replaying a trauma over and over and over and over. And so I was like, actually, don't do that. Don't meditate when that's happening. Do something that feels comforting and soothing to your system. So that's usually when he would get more active. So he would go out with the dog or listen to music or something else. And so this is again where it's like this nuanced way of, yes, like yoga and meditation can be super helpful and healing, and they can also be triggering and contraindicated at times. So that's a little bit of what yoga therapy can look like in the way that I do it, which if you talk to another yoga therapist, just like if you talk to 5 mental health therapists, all their ways of working are going to be very, very different. So the integration of, let's see, the integration of mental health therapy and yoga therapy is, so because I'm a mental health therapist, I'm primarily working with mental health, and I love doing a little bit of what we did at the beginning of our session. That's typically how I'll start with a session, and it'll either be one of the two. So, and sometimes it'll be both. Starting either with the mindfulness of the senses, which can be an anchor to just time and space. And here we are, here's what we see. We'll do some co-regulation where I'll also name what I see. So that can also be kind of an establishing of our time together. And then also getting a holistic view of where a person is at. So how are they showing up physically? What's happening energetically? Where are they at mentally, emotionally? Do they feel like they have a sense of connection today? Do they have any intuition or beliefs or identities that are coming up? And so that's typically how I will start. And then that gives me and us a doorway into where the work will go. So I work actually quite a bit with other mental health therapists. And for a lot of folks, I'm an adjunct, and they're doing the trauma processing and more long-term work with mental health therapists. And then I can come in and do some additional somatic nervous system support. I also work a lot with mental health therapists who think yoga would be useful for their clients, but they're not, either the clients are like, that sounds terrifying, I don't want to go to a yoga class. And so I can support people either to get them ready to go into yoga classes, or I can work with them to create a home practice that they can do on their own. And I'll just say, side note, when I started yoga 20 years ago, there was no way I was walking into a yoga class. So I get that. I bought a book and I went into my room and I read it and I made little sequences for myself. So I was one of those people, even though I very much look skinny white lady, that I belong in yoga classes here in the US, and I still didn't feel like it was a place for me. So I get that hesitation to go into group yoga classes. And then I also work a lot with folks who they've been doing therapy for 20 years. They're like, I can tell you everything about why I do what I do, and yet I still feel stuck. And I find that that's such fun work because they've got so much awareness and so much insight. And when you can invite the body into that awareness and insight, it becomes embodied in a really different way, and things can shift in cool ways. So, and as I said, I do a lot of short-term work. So it can be a really great kind of adjunct for the longer term work that a lot of folks are doing. So that's a little bit of what the integration of mental health and yoga therapy can look like. And so we have these koshas. So koshas is a Sanskrit word, it translates to sheaths. And again, we've already talked a little bit about them. I'm just going to go over them a little bit more. So as one of my teachers talks about this, is like the nesting dolls. And so you've got the physical body that's holding all the other sheaths. So, and again, as one of my teachers says, the body is the gateway. So the body holds our energy, it holds our mind, it holds our intellect, our intuition, it holds our spirituality, our bliss, our connection. And so we can use the body to access all of these, which again, even in the meditation, I said, okay, what do you feel connected to? And then how do you feel that connection? So we can keep bringing it back to this body that you can feel and move and manipulate. But so let me just talk a little bit about these. So the energy is, again, both the breath and our energy. So it's not just the breath, but it's like when you walk into a room and you get a vibe, like that's your energy body talking to other energy bodies, like something's happening there. Either like, oh, I like that, or oh, I don't like that, right? So that can be an energetic thing. Mental, emotional, thoughts and emotions. So intellect and intuition can be a little bit different. So our intellect is essentially, it's our conditioning and it's our identity. So As I talked about with the client, it's the belief of like, I have to be strong, or it's, it's my belief that I'm, or like the belief that I had a long time of like, I don't belong in yoga classes, right? So my intellect has these they're not just thoughts, but they're like more hardwired, like belief systems. And that's rooted in what in this system is considered the intellect. And then the intuition is part of that, but it's that like, I kind of think of it as like this quieter voice that's like, you can do yoga, even though my intellect is like, no, you can't, right? So it can have this, and with this person, it was like the intuition was like, you don't have to be so strong, even though the intellect was like, yes, I do, right? And so they sometimes they can be in alignment, and sometimes they can feel like they're at odds with each other. And so we have to work with both of those aspects. And then, like I mentioned with bliss, again, some people are averse to that word. So connection, spirituality, a sense of where you just feel like I'm okay here with this person, or with my cat, or with my partner, whatever it might be. And so when I'm thinking about the work that I do, I'm looking at all these different levels. Like, how, if this person is coming in for a traumatic loss, how is it impacting them physically? How is it impacting their energy? What's happening mentally and emotionally? What are the beliefs that are coming up around this? What is their intuition saying? Do they have access to their intuition? And then where is their connection? And as all of you know, sometimes when people go through something difficult, they can feel like they lose that connection. They lose that sense of safety or wholeness. And so that can all of these things can be impacted. And again, the word yoga meaning union or integration, it's how do we reintegrate these parts that maybe feel like they're disconnected, or they're separate from each other. I have my handwritten notes here, sorry. And so, and I mentioned this already. So if I'm working with mindfulness or meditation, and I want to work from a trauma sensitive lens, I have to be really aware of how I'm offering meditation. So with this person that I worked with, at times the meditation was useful, and at other times it was contraindicated. So we really had to kind of suss that out. And that's a lot of what I'm doing around bringing in any kind of tool that I'm working with. So if the meditation is primarily ruminating, getting lost in trauma stories, or dissociating, we're just continuing to rewire those neurohormonal pathways of dissociation and rumination and anxiety. So that's not meditation. And so we want to go at a pace, and we want to find a practice that can actually support healing and not reinforcing the aspects of the mind and the intellect that they're coming to you because they're like, I want to change this. And yet, if the meditation is continuing to foster that, then that's not the right approach. So we want to find something that's going to feel supportive to where they want to be going. So I'm just going to go over some ways that I have found that's been useful in my own meditation practice, with my own trauma, and in working with folks. So the first is to start with establishing an embodied refuge. And this is from my teacher, Richard Miller, who he talks about it as the inner resource. And so it's thinking of a person, a place, or a being where you feel a sense of, and again, like I'll ask clients, what are the words, you would use to describe this? Is it safe? Is it love? Is it compassion? Is it okay? Is it home? And then we'll go through kind of establishing that through the senses and then internally. As a way to connect to, not only when I go inside, can I feel the terror or the rage or the pain, but I can also establish and connect and reconnect to a place of refuge. Because I can access that in my body just as much as, maybe not just as much, especially when a big trauma happens, but I can access that at moments, and that we can start to grow and build. So we also want to honor the nervous system. So if somebody comes in and they're like super agitated and pissed off, and I'm like, okay, let's just meditate for 10 minutes. Like if somebody told that to me, I would want to punch them and run out of the room because my fight or flight would be activated. So if somebody comes in with a lot of energy, I like, let's do a walking meditation. Let's do a stomping meditation. Let's do a dancing meditation. So we can use the body to honor where the nervous system is at rather than to try to change it. And then on the flip side, if somebody comes in and they're feeling like they're in more of a dorsal state, like we could lie down and have our eyes open and just look at the clouds for a little bit. And so the position of the body can even be contraindicated or supportive. And so even thinking about how you want to be and what kind of shape your body wants to be in. And I think there's a I've heard that, and I've been in this state too, of like a desire to be sitting on the floor and like looking like a particular kind of meditative person. And like, that's all bullshit. So if you can, if like I'm sitting on the floor right now because I'm comfortable sitting on the floor and I sit on the floor a lot. But when when I first started meditating, all I could think about was like my feet are asleep, my hips hurt, my back hurts. And like again, I'm not meditating. I'm just thinking about one, when is this going to be over? And two, this sucks. And three, this hurts. Right. So not really meditating. So there's nothing wrong with a chair. There's nothing wrong with lying down. There's nothing wrong with walking, running. You can do any sort of position for meditation as well. And also just to back up on that too, with the nervous system, I think for kind of educating folks on their nervous system and how you can honor it, because I know I was certainly trained to sort of override. It's like, oh, if I'm feeling lethargic, I should bounce back up, or I should move around a little bit, versus like, I feel lethargic. Can I allow that nervous system state to move through my system, knowing that it will shift? It will shift on its own if I can allow it to shift. And then if I have a lot of energy, can I let that be a part of my practice too? So start small and work up. 5 minutes a day can be plenty. Sometimes 5 minutes a day can be too much. So start with a time that feels tolerable, and this can also fluctuate day to day. So this person that I worked with, sometimes they would meditate a few times a day, and sometimes they would not meditate at all. Guided can also be a really great anchor. Not everybody likes guided. Some people find voices annoying and like stop talking. But some people, especially if they can get kind of lost in thoughts or dissociation or rumination, having somebody's voice keep as an anchor can be really useful. And again, I'll typically
10 minutes left.
Okay. Great, thank you. I'll typically make guided meditations for folks so that then they're specifically tailored to what they're working on. You want to give context. So trauma is unpredictable, it's chaotic, and it's uncertain, and we don't know what's happening or when it's going to end. And if I've been in yoga classes, and I've probably done this too, where I'm like, okay, close your eyes, we're going to meditate. And I'm like, what? Like, what are we doing? For how long? What's happening? And so just giving people that sort of structure of like, we're going to meditate for about 10 minutes. Here's what we're going to do. And then when I'm working individually with folks, I will typically kind of lay it all out, and then I'll say, what do you think? Questions? You want to opt in? You want to opt out? So I'm also getting consent. And so I'm not just telling them, now we're going to do this, but I'm saying, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And then we go from there. So they know what's happening. And then from here, we can also start, and this is again what we did in our meditation that we started with, is we can stabilize the system through the mindfulness of the senses. So I think of this as like an in or out meditation. And outside meditation can be really helpful if inside super triggering. And then inside meditation can also be really helpful if the outside feels very stimulating or overstimulating. And we'll get to eyes being open or closed in a moment. But also having that sense of relationship. So as all of you know, like the relationship can be one of the most healing things of our work. And so even doing co-meditation or co-regulation, where when somebody arrives, I'll say, tell me 3 things you see, and then I'll say 3 things I see. What 3 things you hear? Then I say 3 things I hear. And so we're sort of doing it together, and we're practicing together. And that, especially if what's happening on the inside is intense and a lot, starting this way can be a way to establish a little bit of a more settled nervous system to be able to tolerate going in. So dissociation, I think, is a brilliant strategy, and it's a wonderful survival skill. And so I don't knock dissociation at all. And the desire to come back into the body after dissociation can be really scary and hard. And so going at a pace that the nervous system can tolerate and handle is really important. Closed eyes or open eyes, both are good. Both are great. So when I typically will just say, have your eyes open or closed, because they can both be really useful. And I already mentioned this a little bit. So for some people, having their eyes closed can feel really overwhelming and sort of out of control. Like, I don't know what's happening if my eyes are closed. For other people, eyes open can be really distracting, and they have a hard time focusing. So there's no right or wrong way for the eyes to be. A lot of times teachers will say, close your eyes, but you can keep your eyes open. And I think it would be helpful to just be very explicit of, like, eyes can be open or closed. And then we want to give the mind an anchor. And so just like there's so many different yoga styles and yoga therapy styles, there's also so many different meditation styles. And we want to just work with the person to find what the best form of meditation is for them. So if somebody comes to see me and they already have a meditation practice, I go, great, let's focus on that. If it's working for you, if it's not working for you, let me know, and we can work on something else. But for some people, it could be a mantra, it could be chanting, it could be loving kindness, breath, affirmations, body scans. All of these can be useful, and all of these can be contraindicated. So it really just depends on the person. So for some people, when they focus on the breath, they feel like they can't breathe, or they're hyperventilating. And so that is counterintuitive. For people who experience a lot of intense sensations, sometimes a body scan can be a lot, because it's just like pain after pain after pain after pain. On the flip side, if it's hard to feel the body, or there's numbness, it can feel discouraging. So it really depends on the person, and kind of finding the meditation that will work for them. And then it can be quite difficult to discern between witness awareness and what's called the self, the big S self, which is that sense of our true nature, and dissociation. The way that I like to think of it is, so witnessing awareness is more of a ventral state. So if you see somebody in ventral and you see somebody in dorsal, a lot of times you won't be able to tell, like, are they in ventral or are they in dorsal, right? Are they shut down, or are they just doing fine? Like, from the external, you might not be able to really distinguish what nervous system state they're in. But as everybody has gone through a ventral experience of feeling like connected and spacious and expansive, and feeling a dorsal experience of shut down and frozen and isolated and scared, internally it feels quite different. And so this kind of witnessing awareness is more of a ventral vagal, kind of connected, expansive. It's a deeper connection to your experience, versus dissociation is a disconnection from your experience. Dissociation is a threat-based response, a survival response, whereas witnessing is like a deeper connection to what is and the present. Even though both of them are sort of these watchers, right? Like the witnessing awareness can observe that I'm speaking right now, and my hands are moving, and I'm seeing you. But it has this expansive version, versus like, oh, this is so scary, I actually have to leave the experience and watch it from above. And I generally don't start with witnessing awareness as like the meditation technique, especially if somebody has a lot of dissociation, because it can be very hard to distinguish between those two. What I have found happens is that when I stabilize the system first, I start small, I give the nervous system an opportunity to kind of move through its natural fluctuations. Witnessing awareness naturally starts to arise versus let's try to witness this. And so we can use other things that can be more anchoring and grounding, because the witness can feel kind of big and spacious, and it can feel ungrounding. It doesn't typically feel ungrounded, but it can be hard to distinguish between those two, especially if meditation is new and or there is a patterning or a default towards dissociation. So that, look at that, 429. I was going to do another meditation, but we'll pause here. And there's actually, I have a YouTube channel and there's a bunch of meditations on there, including one that will expand on the embodied refuge. So if you wanted to explore that, that's pretty much what we're going to do. And there's I can send Erica a link she can send out to you. So here's the kind of the differences between the two. And then a few resources. So the Heart of Wellness, if you want to learn more about Ayurveda and about the melatonin and cortisol, that's the Heart of Wellness. Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness is a really awesome resource around how mindfulness and meditation can be both useful and contraindicated. I have a YouTube channel, and then I'm also doing a 5-month immersion starting next month. So I'll send all the links to Erica for that. So I will pause here and stop my share, and I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, that was really excellent. Thank you so much. That was a lot of really good information.